And so, no, the doctors of the church, such as St. Francis de Sales and St. Robert Bellarmine, do not teach that a pope must teach the heresy, quote, ex cathedra, which is a nonsensical and heretical concept. They teach that a man who is a manifest heretic ceases to be the pope. If he's explicitly a heretic, as St. Francis de Sales says in the Catholic Controversy, he loses his office. And so the guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't understand the magisterium, he doesn't understand Vatican I, he doesn't understand dogma, and he doesn't even reason logically. And he's not a Catholic because he believes that a pope can teach error ex cathedra. Another false argument that he makes concerns the 1917 Code of Canon Law. He says, quote, "What does the 1917 Code of Canon Law say about loss of office?" And he cites Canon 2264. Well, that's false right off the bat because Canon 2264 does not deal with loss of office. Canon 188 deals with the loss of office. And in Canon 188.4, the 1917 Code of Canon Law teaches that a cleric who publicly defects from the Catholic faith loses his office without any declaration. That's what the code teaches about loss of office. And in Canon 197, it states clearly that ordinary power of jurisdiction is that which is attached to an office by law. Okay? So ordinary jurisdiction is attached to an office, like a ball and chain. If you assume the office, you get the jurisdiction. If you lose the office, you therefore lose the jurisdiction which is attached to that office. But he speciously cites Canon 2264, which is not talking about loss of office, but in fact is talking about how excommunicated persons, can perform certain acts of jurisdiction validly. Not that they retain any offices in the church, certainly not heretics, and excommunicated can be minor or major, so it's not necessarily even talking about heretics in all cases there. And we've pointed this out in our talks on jurisdiction, that a heretical bishop, for instance, who has lost his office, the church can supply jurisdiction to him for confession, so he can perform a certain act of jurisdiction validly. He cannot retain the office. And what further proves him wrong, and proves exactly what I'm saying correct, is that Canon 2264 itself, when it's talking about how these excommunicated persons who haven't been declared by name perform acts of jurisdiction validly, it makes reference to Canon 2261.3 and canons in that area, and all of those canons deal with how the faithful may approach certain excommunicated persons for the sacraments, again proving that the context is how an excommunicated person can perform a certain act of jurisdiction with validity, not that he retains the office. So he's completely wrong, and he's further proven wrong when we consider the teaching of the magisterium, and Pope Leo XIII declares in Satis Cognitum 1896 that, quote, "It is absurd to imagine that he who is outside can command in the church," end quote. Okay? A person who is a heretic who is outside cannot rule or command or hold office in the church. So he's completely wrong, and he has perverted the teaching of canon law. The next thing I want to mention is that someone mentioned to him in one of his articles on the sedevacantist issue and so forth, the instance of the Vatican Lutheran agreement on justification, how the Vatican II sect agreed with the Lutherans on justification and sold out to the Lutherans, and he goes, quote, "Nonsense. First of all, the document was revised by the current Holy Father, who recognized some theological deficiencies in it. Second, the document was not even an act of the ordinary magisterium, and never promulgated as teaching. So even if it did agree to a heresy, in the end it never became an official formulary of the Church. Lastly, it appears in no teaching document of the Church, hence it can't be brought for consideration any more than Honorius's private letters can be considered acts of the magisterium. If this is the best you have to offer for sedevacantism, you are not going to get very far." End quote. So this is his attempted response to the manifestly heretical action of the joint declaration with Lutherans on justification. And this is why this guy won't debate us, because this pathetic response would be obliterated in a debate. First of all, the fact that it wasn't promulgated in a certain manner by the Vatican II antipopes makes no difference. Martin Luther did not have any power of the magisterium, yet he was a heretic. You don't have to teach something, quote, magisterially to be a heretic. The joint declaration with the Lutherans on justification is blatantly heretical. It denies the Council of Trent. It teaches that the Lutheran heresies on justification are no longer condemned by Trent. It teaches that they're not bound to believe in Trent. It teaches that some of the worst Lutheran heresies, such as faith alone, human beings are incapable of cooperating in their salvation, are compatible with Trent, or that Trent's canons no longer apply to them. It's blatantly heretical. It's a total endorsement of anathematized Protestant heresy. Okay, they approved it. John Paul II agreed with it. Okay, he's a heretic, regardless of how they promulgate it. It doesn't matter. Someone who could go out and deny the divinity of Christ, just because he doesn't publish it in an encyclical with solemn language, that doesn't mean that he's not a heretic. This is putrid argumentation. But this is what persuades people. This is how bad-willed, darkened, and how much in a fog these people are. And they think that a guy like this is intellectually sophisticated. He's just a fool. Furthermore, he displays his dishonesty because he gives the impression that Benedict XVI didn't agree with it. No, he was very involved in the final version of it. He praised it after it was done. And as anti-pope, on August 19, 2005, he said, quote, the important joint declaration on the doctrine of justification. In his address to Methodists on December 9, 2005, he said, I have been encouraged by the initiative which would bring the member churches of the World Methodist Council into association with the joint declaration on the doctrine of justification, signed by the Catholic Church and the Lutheran World Federation in 1999, end quote. So he's not only in full agreement with the final version of the document, contrary to the dishonest impression this heretic creates, but he's trying to get the Methodists into this, and he says that this joint declaration was, quote, signed by the Catholic Church. So that implies that this is the official teaching of the Catholic Church. And the Catholic Church is free from error. The idea that the Church teaches error is heretical. And if he's saying that this is the teaching, this is what the Catholic Church has put itself into, then that means that you can't reject it. But regardless of whether you believe he has promulgated it in a binding fashion or not, he approves it. He likes it. He agrees with it. He's a heretic. And this proves that his sect is manifestly heretical. This Athanasius, a.k.a. Ryan, a.k.a. Chester, apostate, you're a Protestant, you're in communion with a guy who accepts faith alone. That's a fact. So anything else you're doing, which you think is Catholic, is meaningless because you accept a guy who denies the papacy, who thinks the Orthodox leading pastors are in the church. And frankly, once you've seen the evidence that we've made available on our website and you've had time to digest it, look it over, examine it, and you don't denounce Benedict XVI as a heretic, I have to say you're just an idiot, okay? If you believe he's a Catholic, then you might as well be Orthodox. Okay, he's constantly praising the Orthodox, saying he loves their church, that their ministers are great, that they don't need conversion, okay, that they are holy, okay, that their councils are holy. Okay, so it's a complete mockery of the papacy. And so for these abominable corrupters of the Catholic faith to put themselves out as if they're traditional Catholics and as if they stand for the papacy, it's an abomination. And that's why God blinds these fools, and that's why they attack people who actually understand the Catholic faith, who actually love the Catholic faith, who are defending it. And they're so blind to the truth. And so they're just of Satan. They're ministers of Satan. He knows nothing. This guy is a total fraud. We challenged him to a debate, and within 2 minutes, the guy's responding saying, "You're not qualified." Okay, so his escape tactic is he's going to claim we're not qualified to debate with him. Give me a break. No, he won't debate because he's a coward, because in a debate he'd be destroyed, because his arguments are trash. He's a liar, a fraud, and a heretic. And if people think that what I'm saying is too hard, they need to remember that we didn't pick the fight with this guy. We didn't even basically know who this guy was, and he's calling us buffoons, of Satan, saying that we're hacks, saying that we're peddling nonsense, lying about the buildings of our monastery, trying to insult us in other ways, okay, that we're fallacious. And so we simply responded and said, okay, Let's get on the phone. And he runs like a coward. And this is after he had told someone that he'd be willing to debate us on the phone. And he probably told that individual that he'd be willing to debate us on the phone because he didn't think that we would, bother or whatever. But when it actually came down to it, he chickened out. And these guys like to spread their false arguments in writing, because in writing you can simply ignore key facts. You can simply repeat things that have already been refuted, whereas you cannot get away with that in a telephone conversation because the other person can immediately put you on the spot and show exactly what you are distorting, what you are not addressing, and what you are perverting. And in examining the false arguments that he makes and some of those that I've covered, we can see why he doesn't want to debate.